So Hugh, you've got a hobby which, I'll be honest, I've never tried. You're into scuba diving. How did that start?
It's a hobby that has got me for a long time. I really started to get interested in diving when I was no older than 8 years old, and in those days, Cousteau was on Channel 2 at 10 o'clock, and I always enjoyed watching him discovering the underwater world, and it never really left me since. And I actually did my first dive when I was 14, and I never stopped diving since. So this is really, part of me in a way.
Okay, so Jacques Cousteau was your inspiration.
Yes.
What do you feel then when you're underwater? What kind of a buzz do you get?
It's actually a very interesting question. It can be a real mix and depends on where you dive. Of course, you have a lot of excitement when you dive in warm waters, the Great Barrier or Red Sea from Egypt or Caribbean. Waters are warm, visibility is fabulous, and you have lots of things to see. So the predominant feeling you experience then is excitement. But eventually, it's quite interesting to explore some other sensations in a way when you dive into a little more difficult environment, like in the Channel or in Brittany, where you have cold and current and low visibility, or when you do a wreck dive, for example, where you sort of experience, the darkness and the cold and a little bit more anxiety. And that actually puts you in front of some sensations you were not really expecting to feel anymore. It's like, I know what fear is, I'm done with it, I don't want to experience it, but eventually it gets you back. And you can do the same dive 2 or 3 times and it will always be different from what you see to what you feel. That's what makes diving also very interesting.
Okay, so there's a lot of different kind of dives you can do then.
Oh yeah, it's multiple, and in fact, as you progress into your diving learning curve, in a way, first you will learn about, let's say, the basic techniques, whether it's what we call body breathe, so breathe 2 person on 1 regulator, or empty your mask underwater, that sort of stuff, which is a very simple technique to master. But when you're gone through this, then you will have all the safety related issues, how to go back to the surface in a sort of difficult times, but also you learn to, let's say, to look at things underwater a little differently. You might be becoming a true fanatic of wrecks or let's say archaeological stuff or biology. You learn to look at the small stuff. Everybody's excited about dolphin and manta rays and sharks, but you have so many beautiful, small, tiny things that half of the divers don't even know or don't even want to look at. And when you learn to look at those things, you find life is just a beautiful thing from those small little, fishes or shrimps or whatever. And photography can be also a big hobby. Then you have some guys really deep into the true technical dives, breathing mix for very deep dives, or deep wreck diving or cave diving. And some of the guys get fond of, I'd say, transmitting their passion and love to teach. And I guess with time, I've tried a little bit of everything, and I love to teach. I find this very, very, very nice. I'm quite enthusiastic about transmitting my passion to others. And eventually, it's what makes it interesting is that the first dives turn to be extremely important for any beginner. The first dive can be very like you can start a passion out of it, or you can turn the person totally anti-diving. He can, I wouldn't say freak out, but he can be not at ease, or so the relationship you built with a beginner turns to be extremely important to make him a diving fanatic, or or not. And that's why I always take very particular care when you do a beginning dive. So that's the nice part.
So you're talking about teaching. So who would your students be? What's kind of, are they young kids or middle-aged men?
It varies. Okay, basically you also have to adjust your skills based on who you teach to, but usually we start with I would say 14-year-old and up persons. Okay, the reason for that is we want their, let's say, their body and their biology to be settled, their hearing system, their lungs, and all that sort of stuff. You can do some shallow dives with some kids from 8 years old, but you can't really take them through all the steps. And as excited it could be for a young kid, he will just stay there for the shallow dives until he's 14 to progress. And then you run into a real difference between men and women. Men are usually more daring in the first place, not afraid of anything, but eventually when you put them underwater, well, they realize it's a different world. And I think women are much more humble about it, more curious, quite determined to basically bridge the gap between men and women in that field. Eventually, when you think about it, diving is not really a sport for women. I mean, the tank is awfully heavy. When you're stuck in a wetsuit for half a day, I mean, it's not comfortable. The depth, the cold. It's a tough thing for ladies, and I'm put my hat down to the ones I know who do that. Now, going back to the kids, it's actually quite fascinating to dive with young kids because they get extremely excited, and they just don't see the risk. They just don't see anything but the fishes and the wildlife, and it's fabulous to hear them talk about their dives. First, the big advantage of a shallow dive is that the air autonomy is endless. You can stay forever underwater, and what usually brings you back up is the cold. But when if you dive in the Caribbean with some young kids, and I recall those memories, it never, when they get back and say, "Oh, Mom, I see a lobster this big, and I see this fish. Have you seen this?" You can't stop them. They are so enthusiastic about what they saw. They have totally ignored the sensation part, the feeling part I was mentioning earlier on. They don't care whether it's, hard or current, or, they count on you to handle this for them, and all they want to do is see fishes. So it's quite fun. It's quite fun diving with kids in general, but also being able to adjust yourself to the different category of people you're talking to. So that's nice.
I've got a question for you. I've heard some people, they say when you're diving, you're kind of going back to your primeval roots. Can you agree with that, do you think?
I would definitely agree with that. It's actually, with time, it's part of the things you're sort of looking for again. So, like I said, every dive is different, but in a way, going back to an environment with no walls. So that's specifically true for like when you do dive in the blue, as we call it, not on a wall. When you dive in the blue and when you see that endless blue color really drowning you. I mean, all you want to do is go down and down and down, and you're really attracted by the depth. And there's nothing around you. It's just empty and so silent, and you just, you are weightless. You just let yourself go, and it turns to be, very comfortable in a way. And actually, you have to be a little bit careful about it as well, because, when you run the like 40 meters sort of the threshold, you start to be subject to a nitrogen narcosis, and you feel even better. It's like a little bit of alcohol. Mm-hmm. And you feel dizzy and you feel good, and that's where you have to be extremely careful. But yeah, I agree with you. It's going back to a world where everything is comfortable and where all your worries are gone. Your worries are 40 meters above you, and none of them can reach you there. So yeah, it's yeah, it's really, you look for, something you knew but you don't recall, and I guess we all kind of look for that again, in a way, although it's a little hard one. It's a hard one to admit, I guess, for some of us.
Now, I know you're living in northern France.
Yeah.
And I can imagine the English Channel isn't particularly a nice place to dive. Is that correct, or do you prefer going to warmer places?
Well, I mean, if you let's say if you say I give you the choice to dive in the Channel or to dive in the Red Sea, well, it's a no-brainer. I'll go to the Red Sea. But eventually, what matters in diving is being able to share what you experience with others. And in fact, a nice but difficult dive in the Channel that you're able to share with some friends, you can turn this into an incredible, unforgettable event. And eventually the Channel has a sandy bottom, not too deep, but has a lot of World War II shipwrecks. And there's two sides of it. There is the shipwreck aspect of it, with entering into a steel structure and be careful not to, get stuck and cut yourself and all that sort of stuff. But you can also do a lot of upfront research about the wreck. What's the name of the wreck? What was its purpose? How did it sink? What happened? Casualties, no casualties. And you can go still in there and look for stuff, although it's been underwater for 70 years, and the tides and the currents have made their job, but it's still a pretty unforgettable experience to get into those. So yeah, Channel is, if anyone that is a experienced diver, yeah, send him over. We'll be delighted to have a few dives on a few boats out there. Absolutely.
Now, final question maybe. I know you're a family man, you have a wife, you have a couple of kids. Are they happy to see you go off on a weekend diving all the time, or do they join you?
Well, neither of them. No, they're not happy to see me diving, and I basically allocate some specific slots for diving during the year. Like I said many times, diving is also about sharing. I mean, you can't talk underwater. So it's very important that you're able to share what you saw, what you haven't seen, and what you've experienced during your dive. So I have a business that takes me all over the world, and I've made some absolutely beautiful dives. But there's nothing more sad to me than leaving that boat and going back alone to my hotel room and not to be able to share what I've experienced with others. So in fact, I experience enjoying more a Channel dive with my good buddies than being alone at the other end of the world. But going back to your question about family and all, my son is now over 14, and I've been able to take him a couple of times to some beautiful places, namely Malaysia and Jordan just a year ago, and I've made a couple of dives with him. In those countries you can have a beautiful dive at a very shallow depth, so it's, again, you find all of what I described, the excitement, and for me the pride, and it was just the best times of my life. I mean, I'm being able to share this with the persons I love the most. So my wife doesn't dive, and I respect her choice, and that's fine. I don't twist her arm to do that. That leaves us the opportunity to do something else than diving as well, which is quite nice. But yeah, I guess the day my kids ask me to go diving, I will not stop them. That's for sure.
Hugh, I can see you're really enthusiastic about your hobby.
Yeah, I am. So I encourage everyone who wants to start to get started, because it's not difficult, it's not so physical, and you see some things you've never seen before.